today talking specifically about something that I don't think that I've had anybody come on and talk in depth about. We're going to talk about pick and roll defense. And Coach has taken this information. A part of it is what you're going to see today, but in a larger scale has created a clinic that we'll direct you to towards the end here. But this is one of those that if you are only listening to this, there is video that goes along with it. And so head over to the YouTube page that I have down linked in the description to be able to see the things that Coach is describing here. But Coach, I'm going to just go ahead and let you kind of take things from here and then jump in maybe with some questions, but excited for this.
Sure thing. Yeah. And for those listening, it will definitely be a better viewing experience, probably just so you can see the techniques we're talking about. When I think about pick and roll coverage, I'm sure most coaches, we automatically think of the schemes, the coverage, are we icing? Are we dropping? Are we hedging? All these different coverage options we have and how maybe the scheme around it even fits together. But for me, I've always been most interested with the individual defender and how can we help that individual defender get better and better. And so I kind of try and bring the same viewpoint when we're talking about ball screen defense. I think Brad Stevens actually said it best on some podcast he was on. He was asked about his favorite pick and roll coverage, and instead he went on a tangent, which I'm about to go on too, which is so many times when we're evaluating our coverage as a coach, we always go and jump to the back of the line, right? So we are criticizing our tagger and our rotations. We're criticizing our big. That wasn't the hedge or drop we kind of wanted. We're always on our back foot evaluating and then, assigning blame. Whereas Brad Stevens' point was, if we go to the front of the line and actually look at how it all started, right? The point of attack, the point of the screen, we can probably diagnose and fix a lot more problems that will prevent all those back end problems from occurring. To give you a funny, maybe analogy metaphor here, it's kind of like teaching someone to make scrambled eggs, but never teaching them how to crack the egg, right? Like it doesn't matter how good they whisk or stir the eggs, there's still going to be a lot of shells in them, right? So what you do at the beginning is ultimately going to affect the quality at the end. And same thing with pick and roll coverage, right? If our guys have no ability or skill to navigate screens, then our coverage is always going to look like it sucks, right? And we're always going to be trying to adjust and trying to keep up, when really, if we spend the time to develop our point of attack, we might even have guys that can fight over and erase screens completely. Now we're not even in a coverage situation or a disadvantage situation. If we can develop the individual, the better our team defense will be. And that's always been my standpoint at Lockdown Defense. So let's dive into specifically point of attack defense when we're talking about ball screen before we even get to the discussion of coverage and scheme. I have a video of Dwayne Wade teaching his son. And you can see very clearly the first point of emphasis he's going to do is he's going to get body to body. As soon as he hears that screen coming, Dwayne Wade is going to shrink that space, right? He's going to get attached to the offensive player and funnel them into the screen. Now, of course, funnel them into the screen, that's excluding ice coverage, right? It would be the opposite if we were icing and downing the screen. But for almost every other coverage, we want to engage the ball handler so that we don't get rejected. Another positive to shrinking that space and getting chest to chest with the ball handler is if you don't do that, right? If you're giving space, you're giving a cushion. Well, now the ball handler can set up the screen. For offensive coaches listening and watching, I'm sure you have a whole detailed about how you want your ball handlers to set up screens to get an advantage at the point of the screen. Well, we want to do the opposite as defenders, right? So if we're giving up space, we're going to allow the offensive player to maybe do a move towards the screen and then reject us, get us off balance. Or maybe do the opposite, right? Fake the reject and then come off the screen with an advantage. That's not going to be possible if we engage and smother the ball handler as soon as we hear the screen is coming. Now, some pushback from players might be, well, if I get that close, they'll just take off. All right, well, think about that for a second. Number one, our coverage is designed for them to use the screen, not to refuse it, right? So we're pretty much okay there. And if you engage the ball handler hard enough, and they use it before it's set, what are we in? We're in a moving screen violation, right? We always want to speed up the offense, especially when they're trying to set up the offense. So engaging, really, you don't have to be worried about the guy taking off because you might get an illegal screen or your coverage is going to be ready for you. Okay, we can see here, Dwayne Wade's son, I believe Zaire, engages as he hears the screen coming, and now he's going to get up and over. The last point I'll make, you can see already the amount of points I'm making on the simplest thing as engaging the ball handler. But the more you engage the ball handler, the better your path of recovery will be. And I do this breakdown for my teams every year, and the returners probably get tired of it, but hopefully it's a refresher. If I'm giving space, and I'll try and draw it here, if I'm giving space, a cushion, and that ball screen is set, the offensive player has almost a direct line coming off the screen and getting downhill. And so I tell the guys, I'm the defender in the demo. Someone's setting the screen, the ball handler hasn't moved. We're going at no speed. And I tell the offensive player, ball handler, take 3 steps going off the screen. And he does. 1, gets to the point of the screen. 2, now he's kind of turning the corner. And 3, he's downhill towards the basket. Now, as the defender, especially if I'm giving space at the start, my first step is up to get over the screen. Okay, so I've wasted a step. So I'm now having to, what I should have been doing at the first start, engaging, right? Now I have to make up for that step. So I have to step over. Now I have to step around. Now I'm turning the corner. And now I'm getting downhill to at least ride the offensive player. It's taken him 3 steps. It's taken me 4 steps. Whenever there's a disadvantage, especially in step count to the defender, you're out of the play, right? Because the offense ultimately gets to decide when the race starts, and the defender is always going to be a step disadvantage. And now we're 2 steps disadvantage because we're giving space at the point of attack. Instead, if we engage and get chest to chest, we smell the breath, we smell their BO, and we're right up on their shirt. Well, now we have the exact same path using the screen. So now those 3 steps are equal to our 3 steps. So engaging takes away the reject, takes away their ability to shake and bake you, and also gives you a better line of recovery to navigate that screen. So I'm going to show some clips just of my red flag, right? That's getting rejected. To me, there is no bigger cardinal sin in ball screen coverage than getting rejected. The players I coach know that it is an instant trigger for me. In the beginning of the year, if it happens in practice, you're sure to hear a long whistle and a whole diatribe probably. If we're in a game, especially early in the year, you're probably going to hear the buzzer, right? Just so you can get out off the floor. And it's a standard that needs to be set, because when you get rejected, you can see in the clip, this player is trying to cheat the screen. I can go on a whole tangent about cheating the screen, but he looks over his shoulder to see the screen. He tries to take a step with his lead foot to get over the screen. But in doing so, it kind of really opens his hips. And now the offensive player just has to do 1 cross dribble and he's already by. All right. And what we see here, 2 players immediately out of the play when you get rejected. You and your teammate who's getting ready in coverage. So now we have an immediately 4-on-3 situation just by getting rejected. This player does flip his hips, right? So he does angle the ball towards the screen, but he didn't engage the ball. And so when you're giving space, it doesn't matter what your feet angle is. It doesn't matter what you're trying to influence. If you're giving space, the offensive player can go either way. If anything, you're exposing your top foot for the reject, and now you're not in a great position to recover. I might have included too many clips of the reject, but let's keep going on it, because this is a great example of how a scheme needs to fit with your coverage option, right? And that's really the first part of the clinic. If we're looking at the full clinic, this is just a part of it, the point of attack part of it. But if you are a no middle team, right, you can see the player probably giving a no middle stance to the ball player on the wing. And this screen comes quickly, right? This player just maybe came off a floppy action, and now the screener's immediately running into a wing ball screen, setting it middle. The on-ball defender is in a no-middle stance, and as this ball screen comes, maybe the communication is late, maybe it's not heard, maybe the flip your hip technique isn't executed. So now the on-ball defender has really poor hip angles, and now the offensive player just automatically rejects it and puts 2 players behind the play. And again, we're into immediately 4-on-3 situation just by getting rejected. That's why, to me, getting rejected, that's the number one thing we have to coach how not to do, and that's engage and funnel into the ball screen. And one there, quickest way to get a highlight. Okay, now we talk about we're engaging the player. Now, how do we actually navigate the screen? There are 2 main techniques to navigate the screen that I see most often. This is probably the one I hear coaches instructing the most. It's actually not my favorite, but let's dive into it anyway. I call it knifing over, right? You're knifing over. You're trying to get a quick advantage. So you can see Thibault here. He's not engaged completely to the ball handler, so it's not the perfect clip, but he's going to be in a defensive stance. And if you're a super athletic player, you can actually sneak your closest foot over the screen, right, to try and avoid being screened and stay in your slide and stay in your stance. So you're going to try and knife that closest foot over the screen and try not to get screened at all and stick with him chest to chest in your defensive slide. Thibault is obviously a phenomenal defender, and he is super agile in his defensive stance. And so he's able to keep that pressure and also slide and kind of knife that top foot over the screen and really erase the screen in some cases, right? Not even get screen and stay body to body. If he does happen to get clipped, right, he tries to reach that top foot over and he does get clipped, well, now he's automatically in recovery mode. You can see him turn into a turn and run using a crossover step, and now he's in recovery mode, right? He needs to get back in front of that offensive player to square him back up. Here he goes again, knifing over, and we'll see a really beautiful play of a knifing over clip later on with K.A. Clark when we talk about leverage and recovery angle. But that's knifing over. The second technique to get over and navigate a ball screen is called what I call the pivot over, right? And this is what I see more often when I break down great on-ball defenders, especially in ball screen situations. So Chris Ball used to be a master at navigating ball screens. Here are some examples of him using the pivot over. So instead of trying to move your closest foot, your inside foot, up and over the screen, we actually use it as an anchor foot. And instead, we swing our outside foot, and for those listening, this might be hard to visualize, but we swing our outside foot up and over the screen using our closest foot, our inside foot, as the pivot. Okay, and now we have a great angle of recovery similar to the offensive player, and now we're hip to hip trying to get back into space to square him up. When coaches say get skinny, this is typically what they're imagining, right? Swinging that far foot over top the screen and now giving ourselves an angle of recovery back over the top of it. I will say that this clinic is mostly focused on coverages that involve getting over and fighting over the screen. Getting under the screen is a little different, so we won't be touching on that too much. This clip has Marcus Smart, great engage, especially in middle ball screen. You can see he's completely dictating the way the offensive player has to use the screen, giving him one direction. So he's engaged, no reject, and then uses the pivot over to get through. Here's that clip of K.A. Clark, University of Virginia, great on-ball defender. You can see he is chest to chest with this offensive player as the screen comes, and he's just going to knife over and really plow his way through that screen on the top side. But because he's already attached, right, already shoulder to shoulder, right in that offensive player's shirt, the knife over works perfectly. But for a lot of players who aren't going to be in that super tight, super athletic build, that pivot over is going to be a great solution as well. Once he does get through the screen, we can't just continue to ride the hip of the offensive player, right? Luka is great at that. He gets the player on his back, on his hip, and he just kind of hostage dribbles them, right? And a lot of offensive coaches are now teaching that hostage dribble, or at the very least, a battle of hip to hip, the offensive player has the advantage, right? And usually the refs will even give them the advantage too when we try and wall up if we're just playing hip to hip. We have to separate a little bit and get into recovery. And I think the best example of this is in the full court. You have a lot more space, so it's a little different, right? But when you're beat in the full court, what do you do as a defender? You don't stay hip to hip and just continue to ride the offensive player, right? No, you have to detach a little bit and beat him to a spot to square him back up so you can gain a little bit more control of the play. We don't want to just ride the hip. So you can see here, he gets over the screen and he's going to recover into space so that he can square up the offensive player. And now he's back in legal guarding position. Okay, so we've talked about engaging. We've talked about getting over that first step, whether it's a pivot over or a knife over. Well, now we need to not only get over the screen, but get over it with leverage, right? Because we don't want to just be trailing the play. We got to be almost dictating the play. So many defenders, especially young ones, think of defense as reactionary, right? What's the offense going to do to me? I like to think about defense as, we're in control. We want to have disruptive control. If the offense is going to do something, it's because we're forcing them to do it that way, right? We want to blow up these screens. So we need leverage to fight over. If we just give the offense all the leverage they want, what are they going to do? They're going to put their shoulder to the hip of the screener, or maybe even lower, whatever you're teaching on offense, right? You want your ball handlers to go shoulder to hip, right? So the defense can't get through. That's because they have the leverage. We need to flip that. So as a defender, we need to not only be body to body, but what I like to teach is forearm over upper arm. This is a teaching point I've stolen from Calipari when he was at Kentucky. And you'll see in these clips, Kentucky has great ball screen navigation. And it's because of how much leverage they get. So you can see the defender here putting his forearm over the upper arm of the offensive player. We'll see another clip here. And this is going to keep him accountable to how close we need our players, right? Because it's one thing, you see a lot of players maybe put their hand on the offensive player's hip, but you can get fully extended chasing over that screen and still have a little bit of contact with the hip. But you have no leverage. You're just trailing the play. If you have a forearm over the upper arm of the offensive player, you have the leverage to not only get through the screen, but give yourself enough space so the offense can't go shoulder the hip, right? They have to give you space through it. So let's see some more clips here. This is a good one here. Forearm over upper arm, right? Gets chest to chest. A lot of coaches say, well, they'll call a foul. The refs in high school call a lot of fouls or whatever level you're at. But let me tell you, yes, if it's like a chicken wing and you put your forearm over his upper arm and you have a lot of cushion between you and you're reaching, yeah, it looks like a foul. But when you're engaging, you're chest to chest, and you're getting your forearm over the upper arm of the offensive player, now you can steer him at a far angle from that screen. Here we go again, forearm over upper arm. Keeps them accountable to the distance we want them to be engaged and gives them the leverage of recovery. This is a throwback in the vault. This is Andre Robertson. He used to play for OKC, was one of my favorite defenders. Unfortunately, he suffered an injury and never really got back to full swing, but he was a lockdown defender. You can see him using the forearm over upper arm. I mean, completely annihilates the ball screen. And that's how we started, right? We talked about erasing screens. Right here, we don't need a drop coverage. We don't need anything. We just have a one-on-one defender completely erasing that ball screen. There is no advantage gained from that. And that's because he's using all the techniques we talked about so far. Okay, we've talked about the offensive player. We've talked about the things you teach your offensive player. You want to go hip to hip and all the things we're trying to counter, right? How you set up the screen, we want to take away that setup. You want to create great leverage, we want to take away and give ourselves leverage. But that was the on-ball player. It also, we have to talk about the point of attack for the screener. Let's dive into that. And the first tip I want to talk about is steering the screener. So you can see PJ Tucker, Gobert's trying to come up here and set a ball screen. As we know, we want to set our ball screens, probably at the back hip of the offensive player to give our ball handlers a great advantage. What PJ Tucker does is he is steering Gobert so high that he can't even get to James Harden, right? He's trying to slip it. He doesn't even get a great angle. So he's pushing Gobert, and he's going to make that screen much higher than Gobert wanted. You can see Gobert wants to slip right through it before the switch happens. PJ Tucker's not letting that happen. He's steering Gobert higher and allowing Harden the opportunity to switch under and then they switch off perfectly. And this goes for any coverage, not just switching, although these clips are going to be predominantly switching. But even if we're hedging, if we're dropping, if we're doing anything, steering the screener higher than they intended is always going to give us an advantage, right? Because now maybe we steer it higher and we have a get under line, right? For us, we have a get under line that's about 3 feet beyond the 3-point line. Any screen set there, we're just going to automatically get under. So if we can steer the screen outside of scoring zone, it's always going to be better for us. But either way, we're going to prevent them from getting good angles if we're being physical with the screener. We're not allowing them to create separation, so we're going to be there for the hedge, for the trap, for the switch. And especially if we're switching, we're going to allow our player to get under or navigate that switch a lot easier. I think one of the hardest things to guard is an offensive screener that can constantly create separation between the coverage. If you have a guy who's relentless at sprinting to every screen, at creating separation before he gets to that screen, it's always going to put your coverage in a bind, right? Whether you're trying to hedge and now there's too much separation, the split is open, or the hedge is late, now we're in a foul situation, the trap is late, the switch is late. He's got so much advantage coming downhill onto a drop coverage. There's so many things if you're not being physical with the screener, or if that screener is really good at creating that advantage. For those watching, we're just seeing some more clips. Okay, so that's really the fundamental ground floor we want to set with our players, right? When we're talking about navigating the point of attack of the screen as the on ball and steering and being physical with the screener so that we're at the point of attack as well with our secondary defender in our coverage. All right, so just to wrap up kind of the point of attack defense for ball screen coverage, we've laid the foundation, hopefully, of good technique. We've talked about effort and all that other stuff. But what about the little savvy tricks and weekend warrior things that we can maybe help players get an extra advantage, not only to doing the technique and doing it with effort, but maybe some tricks that could help them even further. So first thing I'm going to talk about is Lou Dort. And I love watching Lou Dort. He's one of my favorite defenders to watch. Without a doubt, I promise you, you watch the OKC Thunder play. I think they play tonight. Lou Dort gets a moving screen violation almost every game. Sometimes multiple a game. The reason he does that, well, sometimes it's because he engages the ball handler and he has so much on-ball pressure that the guy takes off before the screen's set, right? Yes, that's going to lead. Another reason he gets so many illegal ball screens called is how forcefully he tries to go over them, right? So you'll see in these clips, he's using the pivot over technique, and like a lot of coaches say, get skinny, right? That's what they're imagining. He's not imagining that. And that's why I really don't like to use the term either. I don't want our guys to play skinny, right? I want our guys to play big and strong. And so Lou Dort, right, screen set, he's pivoting over, but he's pivoting over with so much force. There's no way you're going to stop him from getting over this screen. And if you do get in his way, he's going to let you feel it, right? It's kind of like Kobe Bryant talking about in the Redeem Team. The first screen Powell sets on him, he's going through. Sometimes, yeah, that's maybe too extreme, flagrant foul, whatever these days, but it also sets the message right away. I used to have a player that would blow up the first screen of every game. And sometimes they would call a foul, sometimes they wouldn't. Sometimes they would call an illegal screen, which is the case for Lou Dort a lot of times. When he's going over so physically and forcefully, and you get in his way as the screener, the ref is in a position that he has to make a call. And because Lou Dort is using the pivot over, he should be fine. The screener is kind of sliding into his area, or at least it looks like that. And he gets hung up on this screen here and forces the ref to make a decision. Was he moving? Yes, he was. Again, here, he's going over so forcefully with this pivot over technique, he's going to create contact sometimes. And when that contact is made, number one, hopefully you're setting a tone to the screener. Don't screen me anymore this game, right? Or at least, maybe you'll definitely see it. If you hit a guy in the chest real hard trying to get over a screen, next time maybe he loosens up and rolls early, right? And here we see Lou Dort hits the screen trying to get over it, offensive foul. And that's a turnover, and it's also a foul. It's the equivalent really to taking a charge, and we love taking charges. We love moving screens. I know I do. You can see Marcus Smart even breaking this down in some kind of conversation he was having on the court. You can see he demoing in slow motion. Boom, he's using the pivot over technique, and he is trying to ram his inside shoulder to that defender's who's setting the offensive player who's setting the screen, his hip. He wants to open up that screener, right? And at the very least, he's creating contact for a chance to call a moving screen. If our players are constantly thinking about getting skinny and not getting hit, which is sometimes useful depending on your defender, but a lot of times it's going to make them so hesitant to create contact and take such long paths around plays where really you're masking illegal screens that are being set on you, or maybe calls that you could get become illegal screens. So Marcus Smart talking about opening the hip of the screener with force. Same thing. He's going to talk about sending a message to the guy. And then he's also going to talk about grabbing. We see offensive players sometimes grab the leg of the screener. Marcus Smart also likes to do that. So he's going to use the pivot over and reach his inside hand to the leg of the screener. And that's going to allow him not only to get through the screen, right? It's instantly made it clear that he has separation between him and the offensive player, but it's also going to allow him to pull himself through and delay probably the roller's roll, right? And trip maybe that guy up too. And at full speed, bang, bang, it is really hard to see those little nuances of the games as a ref, even though to us watching in slow motion, it might look like a foul. But using a forceful pivot over, using maybe a sneaky grab of the leg to pull yourself through and prevent a quick roll, those are all tips to really give you an advantage navigating screens. Right here, we have the most predictable dribble in basketball. This is a funny story. I think a month ago, I was driving somewhere and a player I used to coach as like an 8th grader in AAU called me up. We had he's dabbled into coaching as a manager and stuff in college. And he called me up just to chat, and he said he's been playing pickup more and he's been using this technique and he's been getting a lot of steals. And I said, what technique is it? He says, the one you taught me about, the most predictable dribble. It is so funny, the light bulb moment that happens sometimes for players. What's the most predictable dribble in basketball? To me, it's coming off a ball screen. Because when the offensive player comes off the ball screen, that ball is right there every time. So as the player defending the ball screen, usually defending the screener, you know exactly where the ball is about to be. To me, that's the most predictable dribble. And when we hedge or when we trap, we always go for a steal there, right? We poke through that area. And then if we don't get it, that's fine. Then our chest is there and we're in our trap or our hard hedge. But you'll be surprised at how many steals you get just knowing the ball is going to be right there off that screen. You can see University of Virginia, when they hedge, they're almost spearing through that spot and creating a lot of fumbled balls and turnovers sometimes. Most predictable dribble, little swipe there, gets the ball. Now there's been no screen, right? He had to retreat just to get the ball back. It's also good if you're maybe have extremely long arms. I don't particularly teach this, but if you're dealing with a player with extremely long wingspan, maybe they can even poke it away knowing that dribble's coming as well. You can see we got a clip of Anthony Edwards doing it there. Another little tip, just to create turnovers in the ball screen. Jokic is great at this. Not the most agile defender, obviously, not going to be a defensive player of the year candidate, but he is really good at disrupting ball screens in drop coverage. And he does it by being active with his hands in the coverage. So he is constantly giving a little stunt or a little swipe at players as they come off the screen. Again, it's a predictable dribble, not only because they're trying to attack, but also they have a defender usually on their other hip. So that ball is going to be there. And Jokic is great at constantly swiping when guys try and pick up, maybe for a pull-up, pick up to pass the ball, or just stunting in general as they're trying to, size up or hostage dribble. And Jokic gets a lot of these kind of swipe away steals in this situation. So again, it's just about being active a little. The more we know what the offense is going to do, the more advantage we gain, right? Anticipation. We don't have to constantly be wondering, right? Now we can be, in the driver's seat knowing what's about to happen and how we can take advantage of it. So those are some tricks. Hopefully they help or at least help send the message in your ball screen defense.